Welcome, Sober on Purpose family. I am Tanya Gioia, the host of the Sober on Purpose podcast, and I'm doing a solo episode. I really want to lean into emotional sobriety. We've been talking about it, talking around the edge around it, but not really talking about what it actually means. So, when we're talking about emotional sobriety, we're talking about the fact that we're not numbing out, that we're not covering our feelings, that we're being very aware of where our feelings are and how we feel deep inside. Oftentimes, I can come in and feel like totally overwhelmed, and I will get upset over nothing. Who else has been there? I mean, it's a very common thing. I want to share with you a story today, but first, I want to share with you a scripture that comes from First Peter 5, 8 and 9. And I've really been hanging out in First Peter. What I often, maybe you didn't think this, but I often thought of Peter as somebody who maybe was not very bright, or maybe didn't really understand the mission of Christ, or maybe wasn't able to be loyal. I think we get, I'm going to say it out loud, we almost get a buffoon picture of Peter, but that's not true. When you look at him biblically, he actually walked a very tight balance between humility and his giftedness. So he was a gifted teacher. He was a gifted person who brought people to Christ, who really understand who Christ was. He was the Messiah. He was the one who was the first to run to him. He understood him, and he could have taken his gifts, his favor from Jesus, and become a spiritual bully and bullied people into doing what he thought was best. But instead, he served with love and humility and taught the word in a way that people could understand it. So in this First Peter passage, it says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that some kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world." So it's taken a long time for me to connect this passage with an experience that I had 13 years ago. And in this experience, I really began to feel what sober-minded was and how much the enemy really wanted to corrupt me. I was at a Women of Faith conference, and if you've been to one of those, they're a big arena conference. We were downtown in the Pepsi Center. I was there with other women of my church, and truly, I had no business being there, but I had every reason to be there. So my boys were really young. They were 4 and 6. Jerry and I had separated. The addiction had risen. I was crazy. He was dealing with his own stuff. We were dealing with what I call cops, courts, and chickens. There was just a lot going on. And I certainly didn't have the money to be at this conference, to spend the night, to pay for food, to do anything like that. And the church provided it all. They were able to get me down there. Plus, I had this wonderful woman who stayed with my boys while this was going on. So here I am. I've got a full restraining order going on between my husband and I. The boys are really small. They completely need me and him. And I don't have a full-time job. This has just kind of blown up. And I'm like, how can I even be here? How can I even say, okay, I can take a break? Because I was working multiple places at a time. The devil puts that in your mind, that you don't get a break, that God can't provide for you, that he can't take care of you, that you are not the person that you think you are, and that you have to work harder and harder and harder and harder. You have to keep performing, or you're not going to have what you need. But that's not true. This is where emotional sobriety comes in, because Jesus says he takes pride in looking after the sparrows. Not one sparrow falls that Jesus and God don't know about. And look at the arraignment of the lilies. They were more beautiful than Solomon in all of his robes. We don't trust that God has this for us. So here I am, full restraining order. Husband is living someplace else. I'm out on 20 acres with, at that time, still probably 400 chickens, gone through a winter of plowing. I have a whole nother story about that. I learned to plow, learned to take care of the boys, learned to get to work, and God held me the whole time. So God makes a way for me to go to this Women of Faith conference, to have a break, to be with these women, to really enjoy that. But that's not where my emotions are. My emotions are, I shouldn't be here. I don't have the money to be here. I'm not going to be okay. All of these, if you've ever been to a Women of Faith, all of those women are well dressed and presenters and look like they have money. I am so caught up in this mindset. I am not emotionally sober. I am so panicked about the money. I almost can't enjoy what's going on. So I'm there with women. I enjoy to the best of my ability what's going on. I'm trying not to spend any money. And there's a break. And in the break, God says, I want you to go to the World Vision table. And I'm thinking, Lord, I don't have any money. What am I gonna do? How can I can't even pay for my own kids. I mean, we're having trouble putting food on the table. People have opened their freezers. We lived in an area where they did a lot of hunting. They've opened their freezers. People would invite the kids and I over for dinner. I was so thankful every time that happened. The Lord calls me up to this table. And if you've ever seen World Vision, it is an organization that takes care of children around the world. And not only takes care of the children, but also takes care of their community. So every time things gets put in there, they're taking care of their community as well. Really well run, and very little goes to the administration of it. And they were talking about it at the Women of Faith. I'm called over to the table. I'm trying to listen to God. We're at a faith conference, and I'm looking at this going, I, I, I don't even know that I'm going to have enough for groceries next week. And Lord, you want me to sign up for one of these kids? So I take a deep breath and I look at the woman and I say, hey, do you have one that's about 4 years old? Because that's what I thought I was hearing. I have a 4-year-old. Let's do one that's about 4 years old. I got the cutest little boy in South Africa that I have ever seen in my life. His name was Insane, and we supported him until he timed out of the program, which made us extremely sad. But I'm looking at this little boy. He's got this little mad face. It is so fabulous. She's 4, just like my little boy is 4. He's standing there in his shorts and his button-down shirt, looking like he's going to school. We wrote letters. We sent the money. We hooked it up. And my boys got involved and they learned about him, and we learned about South Africa and we talked about it. It was a fun thing to do at dinner. And God provided the money for him every month. Every month it got paid for. Not only every month, but I've been paying for a child every year for over the last 13 years. And I look back on that and I think I was really being pushed not to be sober-minded, not to listen to God, not to look at him as the person who is the provider. I was really being pushed to say, I can't afford it. I don't trust. I don't know that this is the right thing to do. And here's the key. Here's the key that I want to talk about with the sober-mindedness. That's what happens when somebody uses substance, when somebody zones out on the TV, when somebody keeps picking up their phone. right? We lose that sober mindedness. And by losing that sober mindedness, we can't hear the still small voice anymore. And when we can't hear the still small voice anymore, we lose our way. And here's what I want to remind you. I didn't have the money for this. I knew I didn't have the money for this, but I stepped out in faith. And a lot of times you have to step out before you see the results. And it has been such a blessing. I mean, I can share with you now that this is something that God just keeps providing for and keeps providing for. There's never been a time that He hasn't provided for. In fact, because of how the program works, we are supporting our fourth little boy and his community. They keep sending me ones that are 4, and then eventually in the teen years they time out of the program, or what happened with InSync, and it is his family moved out of the community. I wrote letters to World Vision. The boys and I called World Vision, and we said, we want to know where he's gone. We want to know what's happening to him. And they said, all we can say is he's moved out of the community. So if he ever sees this, we're still praying for you. You touched our lives so deeply, knowing that God was saying very clearly to me, Tanya, I will provide for you. You are my daughter. Those are my children. I will husband you. I will be there for you. I will be your provider, as I have always been. So when you are sober minded, you can remember Psalm 145:18. The Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. Lord, give me grace and strength to persevere and an obedient heart to do your will. I would never have understood this grace had I been stuffing myself with sugar, which at the time I couldn't afford, had I been so caught up in my own thoughts. I let myself be led because I got quiet. I had a sober mind. I was not allowing the overwhelm of self-pity to drop in. So what I want you to really take from this is that getting quiet allows God to speak to you, but also letting go of those things that are covering up your thoughts, that are keeping you from being sober-minded, from being emotionally sober, from hiding from God. Because what did Adam and Eve do the first time they realized they were naked? They hid. They took what they felt was shame and guilt, and it caused them to hide. My not having resources often makes me feel shameful and guilty, still to this day. But then when I come back to the story of InSync, of looking at that little boy's face on that card, of being able to write him and have his mother write back, of being able to send gifts, of being able to support him all through those years. I believe it was close to 6 years before he left the program. And then the next little boy, and then the next little boy, and then our current little boy. That is God saying, I've got you. I've got this. No matter what you go through, I am there to provide, protect, and love you. Please take that verse to heart, that being sober-minded, being watchful, is about guarding your heart from what the enemy is telling you. It's telling you you're not good enough. You don't have enough. You'll never be enough. You can't do that because you just don't have the money to do that. That's not what God says to you. He says, you're beautiful. You're worthy. You're precious. You're my beloved. And he says it over and over and over. So I really encourage you to get one of those little tiny books. It takes no time at all to read that. And then go into the Johns, John 1, 2, and 3. But even start with James. Count it all joy, my friends, when you have been given trials. I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking. So emotional sobriety, we're going to keep digging into that and what that looks like. Right now, we are so excited that we're getting ready for the Blessed Family Recovery Summit. In fact, it is opening when this podcast comes out. I would love to see you there. This is a group of 16 speakers who all grew up in Christian homes and at some point dealt with addiction themselves, dealt with addicted family members, and have stepped into the hope, because hope deferred makes the heart sick. If you're in a hope deferred space, you're probably not being sober minded. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. It drops you into self pity. It drops you into hurt. It drops you into anger. It drops you into this deep well of sadness. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but the tree of life is fulfilled when hope is fulfilled. So join us October 24th, 25th, 26th. The summit is free. Come look at those tickets. We'll have links below. You will get tools. You will get hope. You will get the opportunity to interact with the speakers, to hear their stories. And just like mine, something so simple as paying a small fee every month for a young man around the world lets me know every day that Christ has me, that God has me, that I will be supplied and taken care of. So thank you for joining me on Sober on Purpose. Make sure to join us at the Blessed Family Recovery Summit. Where is God in the chaos of addiction?